Released on June 18, 2001 in North America, Twisted Metal Black takes the series in a much darker direction with a gloomy art style and somber cutscenes. It's also the first Twisted Metal game to have a mature rating. This entry took advantage of the power of the PS2, and it reflects in the amount of content and gameplay. It also was developed by Incognito Entertainment, which included a bunch of people from Single Track, the people that made the first two Twisted Metal games. So without further ado, let's give Twisted Metal Black a deeper look. The combat engine of Twisted Metal Black feels really good. The first two entries felt clunky at times, and 3 and 4 were too loose, but this game has it just right. Even cars that have bad handling don't feel like a nightmare to turn around. Because of this, movement in this game is so smooth. Players can have absolute control over their vehicles, and attacks are easier to land. Speaking of attacks, let's talk about the new weapons. Gas Can. A gas can is shot up into the sky and keeps going until the player decides to ground it with L2. Zoomy. A bunch of missiles shoot at the closest vehicle they are facing towards. Satellite. A series of missiles is shot into the air. It damages vehicles within the region of the crosshair once they hit the floor. Reticle. This weapon can shoot plenty of missiles at enemies, but has to charge up before it can shoot a target that's locked on. The weapon pool of this game is fairly varied. It's enough to make just about every battle interesting. Even though there's only 3 new weapons, they really add a lot to the combat. Also, whenever the player switches weapons, the vehicle usually does a small animation putting away the previous weapon and taking out the next. Another general gameplay aspect is the healing stations from Twisted Metal 1 return, and they will bring vehicles back to full health, unlike the health packs, which will only restore a percentage of health. Also, there's helicopters that fly around the map and drop weapons and health for the contestants to pick up. Normally, I would talk about the characters in the gameplay section, but I'll go over them in the visual sections for reasons I'll get into later. Let's move on to the tournament mode. Tournament mode is the simple, destroy every vehicle and move on to the next level formula of previous Twisted Metals, but this game gives the player the option to choose between 2 levels every few levels. It adds a little bit of freshness to the game. As the player goes through the tournament with multiple vehicles, they'll find which levels are better suited for certain vehicles, and they can use that to their advantage. They could also go to the other level not optimized for their character to add some challenge. This game has 1 mini-boss and 1 huge boss battle. Halfway through the game, players will face Minion, and then face against Tanker and Warhawk in the final level. This may seem underwhelming considering that 3 and 4 had more boss battles, and they never interrupted the flow of the gameplay, but it's acceptable for this game because of the difficulty. This game's difficulty is on par with the first game, but it is more tolerable and fair in this game, because the player has 3 lives for every level they fight in, compared to the 2 lives players were given to complete the whole tournament mode with Twisted Metal 1, 2, and 3 with. Despite this, the contestants really know how to pack some damage in this game, and it can feel at times like the computer opponents are ganging up on the player and ignoring each other. Again, it's not too hard to pass levels with 3 lives, and there's also memory card compatibilities the player can use to save their progress and come back to a hard level if they couldn't complete it the first time. But it can be frustrating having to deal with opponents that only seem to attack the player. On the bright side, at least there aren't any umpires like in Twisted Metal 1. That would be a nightmare. So, to recap, having less bosses in this game isn't so bad, considering the levels themselves are still a challenge to get through. Twisted Metal Black was the first game to include hidden unlockables that don't require the use of cheat codes. In order for players to unlock certain characters or levels, they'll have to do specific tasks, such as destroying a piece of the map, or finding a secret area. Once they do, the player will be told they've unlocked something, and it's ready to be used whenever the player feels like it. Twisted Metal Black introduced a new game mode called Endurance, and true to its name, players pick a vehicle and level, then have to survive as long as they can, as pickups are limited, and enemies keep coming. The multiplayer in this game was given a revamp, with multiple modes to choose from, and certain levels were changed to better fit a 2-player battle. There's the classic 1v1 mode, and co-op career, but it also includes a new mode where 2 players pick multiple vehicles they want to play as, and must defeat the other player before they run out of vehicles to use. These game modes also appear in the online mode of this game. Yes, Twisted Metal Black Online was released in 2002 and is exactly what you think it is. This mode is also functional on the PS4 version, and I think it worked on the PS3 version too. As mentioned before, the visuals for Twisted Metal Black are very bleak and depressing. The game only has so much color, and most of the levels take place at night. The graphics are pretty much what one would expect from an early PS2 game, although it does have a good amount of polish and detail. Okay, let's move on to the cutscenes now. This game utilizes pre-rendered cutscenes that tell the story of the character the player chose for their story playthrough. There's also the loading screens, which have the character's portrait on the right, and text displaying what they're thinking in between levels. Most characters have a beginning cutscene that gives a little bit of exposition, including some information about the character's personality, why they were locked up in the asylum, and when Calypso shows up, they will usually say what their wish is. After the player beats Minion, they will fall asleep and dream about their past, and it gives more backstory about what they've done and why they want to win the Twisted Metal contest. Finally, after the last level is beaten, Calypso grants the character his wish, and the winner is either happy with the outcome or are deceived by Calypso with his meticulously devious behavior. Just like the art style of this game, these cutscenes are rather dark. The stories get real mature and shocking. Not to mention, these stories can be rather disturbing at times. The game creates unsettlement not by what it shows, rather by what it doesn't show. There's plenty of close-ups and cutaways from the action. Take for example, Mr. Grimm's ending. Mr. Grimm was an American soldier in the Vietnam War and was taken prisoner along with his buddy Ben by a Vietnamese soldier. They were placed in a hole and were given no food or water. One of the Vietnamese generals tells the American soldiers that it's every man for themselves and throws out a knife and fork for Grimm to use on his buddy. Shortly after, Ben dies from a gunshot wound inflicted upon him, not too long before he and Grimm were captured. Grimm makes the decision to eat his buddy, reasoning that Ben would understand, and instead of directly showing Grimm impaling and eating his friend, it shows his actions from the shadow on the wall. You see, if the camera were to stay on Grimm eating his pal, a lot of the shock and unsettlement would have been lost in the gross shot of a human committing cannibalism, so by not showing everything, the moment stays disturbing. Not to mention, the tight environment, lack of light, and Grimm's dire situation also help to create tension, which adds to the uncomfortable nature. Now that I've explained the essence of the cutscenes, let's move on to the characters. Normally, I would have done this in the gameplay section, but the characters in this game have backstories that are explained through the cutscenes. One more thing, I'm going to introduce new characters that had their vehicle already in a Twisted Metal game before, because of the backstories they were given. Junkyard Dog. Billy Ray was a normal farmer, till one day, a crop duster sprayed some kind of chemical that knocks him out and mutilates his face. After waking up, Billy finds his wife is having an affair with the pilot of the crop duster, leading him to pick up a hoe and kill his wife. Billy Ray wants revenge on the pilot, if that wasn't already clear. Crazy 8. Crazy 8 was a boxer that, one night, went up against someone he had no chance against. He was then beaten and bruised. His face was completely mangled. Crazy 8 was told of a doctor that could fix him up, but that same doctor also bet money on him to win that night. So while he is asleep during the operation, the doctor sewed Crazy 8's eyes and mouth shut. After the operation, Crazy 8 went AWOL and searched for the doctor, only to hurt and kill innocent people in the hospital. Crazy 8 drives the car he's had since his days as a boxer, and is able to participate in the tournament due to a sixth sense he has to make up for his loss of sight. It's pretty obvious his wish is to mess up the doctor that mutilated his face. Brimstone. Brimstone was a preacher that was called in to perform an exorcism on a baby, as requested by the parents. Preacher's memory of what happened next is hazy, but he recalls the demon possessing him and using Brimstone's body to cause havoc on the church, killing the baby and the parents. As his wish, Preacher wants to know what actually happened that day. Well, turns out, Preacher was actually performing a baptism that day, not an exorcism, and drowned the baby in the water and killed the parents. No demon, no possession. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary is a woman who was bullied by the boy she crushed on when she was younger, something that scarred her for the rest of her life. As her friends kept getting married, she grew insanely jealous, to the point where one day, at a friend's wedding, the bride tossed back a bouquet of flowers to Mary, enraging her, as she's never felt romantic love in her life. Mary then slaughtered everybody in the church. Bloody Mary drives Spectre's car. It wants Calypso to give her a man that will always love her. Manslaughter. Black. Yes, that is his name. Is an insane man wearing a gimpy suit, and it seems he wants to kill Calypso for reasons unknown, although it is indicated he was built by somebody to kill him. If Manslaughter wins, Calypso will trick Black into a trap. However, he lives and continues his hunt for the evil man. Raven. A woman that's fascinated with tarot cards and magic of that sort. When Raven was younger, she would hang with her friend Kelly at the docks. One day, two guys pulled up to bully the girls, teasing them for being witches. One of the guys held Kelly over the water surrounding the dock, threatening to drop her to see if witches can swim, the other guy holding Raven back. The first bully accidentally drops Kelly and drowns as she can't swim. Kelly tells Raven as she's dying to go after the bullies and get revenge. Raven drives Shadow's car, and do I really have to explain what she wants? Charlie Kane and his son. Charlie Kane was an honest man that was killed in cold blood right in front of his son. Not being able to deal with his father's death, the son decides to put his father back together and use his dead carcass to drive Yellow Jacket through an invention he made. The son wishes for Calypso to bring his dad back to life. And last but not least, Dollface. Dollface was an ordinary girl that worked for someone that made weird masks, who was known for being a hothead. One day, she accidentally spilled something on her boss's creation, and angered him to the point where he nailed one of his masks onto her face and used a special key to ensure the mask would never come off. Dollface wishes to get this key from Calypso, as the mask has already taken its toll on her, although, ultimately, she doesn't use the key after she wins the contest. Wow, that was dark. And that's not even including the returning contestants. What's great about the characters in this game is it's easy to see their motivation. Their intentions are cut and clear, unlike previous games where it seems the wish of a character seems odd or unfit for their personality. If that wasn't enough, it seems like this whole game takes place inside Sweet Tooth's head. Whenever the player plays as Minion, they'll notice that his loading screens seem to be nonsense. However, they can be decoded to read, "I do not think this is real. I must speak in code, or else he will discover me." We are trapped in his head. This is how he sees the world. How Sweet Tooth sees his life. It is not real. All of us are trapped in his head. I miss the old colorful world. We will return to old world one day. In the real world, my name is Marcus A. Kane. It appears to be from the text that all the characters are just Sweet Tooth's perception of the world. Dark and twisted. It even reflects in the art style and desolation of the levels. Notice how the sun is seamlessly absent. Symbolization for the damnation of his world. Anyways, it's pretty clear which characters represent what aspects of everyday life Sweet Tooth thinks about. For example, Outlaw and Preacher can be seen as his interpretation of authority or law enforcement in religion. Perhaps Minion represents Sweet Tooth's conscience. Maybe he does know right from wrong, or what he thinks of the world is not true, but it's repressed, never to be seen, and it must speak in code, or else Sweet Tooth will notice it and put an end to that train of thought. To go even deeper, the last message, in the real world, my name is Marcus A. Kane, connects to Twisted Metal 2, as there's a character with the same name, and in Twisted Metal 2, his wish is to break free from the simulation. Once he does, Marcus wakes up from a coma, and lying in the adjacent beds are the other competitors from that game. So, is the Twisted Metal contest all a sick reality created by Sweet Tooth? How much of the truth is actually being told to the players? Well, I think that's enough about the story. Let's talk about the levels. The level design in this game is immaculate. The big levels have a huge amount of paths to go down, plenty of power-ups, areas are wide and open, and they have many secrets. One could play this game for years and still find some secrets they didn't even know was there before. The medium and small size levels are pretty good too. They engage players into destroying their enemies, while also giving them as much escape routes as possible. Now, it's time for the obligatory analysis of the levels. Junkyard. A wide open area with the main building sitting in the middle for shelter and a place for weapons. There's 2 trash compactors that'll crush any car idling in it, a magnet, plenty of debris to drive around and use, a downed airplane, and hills and ditches to use. There's also a plane that flies around the map that the player can shoot down. Suburbs. A small town including a church, stores, restaurants, and even an amusement park with a Ferris wheel that can be detached from its foundation. Freeway. Sure enough, it's a highway with exits, ramps, construction sites, and bridges. There's even a tower you can jump into to get away from the action for a little bit. Making sharp turns and knowing the location of the items is the key to advancing. There's also Minion Stadium in this level. Highway Loop, a more close and personal version of the freeway. Players are tied to the roads. There's little room to get off the beaten path for a small moment of peace. Players can drop from the damaged bridges, but be careful not to fall into the water. Minion Stadium, a small stadium where players will never be able to leave their enemy's sight. Kill Minion as quickly as possible, as he's relentless and shows no mercy to anybody who enters his territory. Prison Passage to Asylum. There's 2 parts to this level. Players find themselves on a ship where they'll have to fend for themselves against the other 2 enemies in the close quarters they start out in. After a few minutes, you'll get access to the rest of the ship. Soon, the ship will enter the final destination, the Asylum. The Institute sits in the middle of the level and can be used as a hub to get back onto the boat or go outside. Black Road Ridge, a snowy area consisting of a road that connects 2 lodges together on top of a mountain. Visibility is limited because of the snow, and the player is always one bad turn from falling off. There's no place to hide, so gear up and finish enemies as fast as possible. Skyscrapers. The rooftops are hectic and prime for vehicular combat. Jump between buildings, but make sure to have enough boost as to not fall to your death. Break through windows, and drive along the flat roofs for safety. Drive-in. The contestants battle it out at a small drive-in where the movie screen displays the player's point of view. There's little room for shelter, but a lot of pickups, so dodge as much as you can and take out enemies quickly. There's also a few original multiplayer only levels. Dog Pound, a very small area inside an asylum. Aside from the lift in the middle, there's nothing else to this level. It's very barren and flat. Elevators. This level takes players to a separate part of what seems to be the junkyard, where 2 open areas lay on the opposite sides of the map, with a platform players can get onto to get the higher ground. Power Plant. The contestants battle it out in this closed-out highway surrounding a power plant. There's plenty of room, a few obstacles, and tunnels for protection. It kind of looks like the Los Angeles level from Twisted Metal 2. Sewers. Players go underground when there's an open space in the middle, with pillars surrounding the outside, and tunnels to evade the action. Pretty simple. Oh boy, that was a lot of maps. These maps have got to be some of the best maps out of the series. They're so varied, meant to be explored, interactive, and overall fun, whether the player is going against 1 enemy or 7 other enemies. Alright, before I end this section off, let me talk about the menus. The menus in this game take place during the Twisted Metal contest. The opening cinematic swerves through destruction and finally lands upon Sweet Tooth. The camera will move to other parts of the vicinity as they navigate through the menus. The character select screen is pretty cool because it's a freeze frame in the middle of the contest, so players will get to see which characters are doing what as they fight for their lives. The player can switch between looking at the vehicle, which will display the stats, and the character, which will display why that person is in the asylum and other general information. The sound design for Twisted Metal Black is fine for the most part. The music isn't that adrenaline pumping rock and metal music from previous games, rather, it's more slow and atmospheric. The music in this game works in 3 parts. Ambience, where combat is limited among the battlefield, external, when things start to get heated and weapons fly, and action, which is when either 1 enemy remains or the player is playing endurance mode. The music flows into each section seamlessly. It's noticeable if you listen for it, but if you're just playing the game and focusing on the action, the music will change without it seeming like it is. The music can still create energy, but this energy comes from fear rather than feeling badass about laying waste to the enemies. The discomfort of the visual combines with the tension-building music to create an unsettling feeling. Aside from the music, the voice acting in this game is pretty good. The voice actors do a decent job at portraying their character, adding some personality, and showing some emotion. Other than that, I don't have much else to say for the audio department of this game.
The memories end there. I don't think I like the man I'm turning out to be.
Twisted Metal Black has a decent amount of extra stuff. First, there's a compilation of deleted and altered cutscenes on YouTube. The poster explained he knew someone that had connections with Incognito, who was able to pass on the cutscenes. Most of these changes are pretty small, and not that significant, but some changes are pretty shocking. Like Brimstone's ending actually shows the preacher drowning the baby he's supposed to be baptizing. Whether some of these more shocking changes were cut to add to the unsettling nature of the cutscenes, or to maintain an M rating is unknown. There was also some significant changes to the characters' motivations too. Like the people Outlaw killed were skinheads that terrorized him and his family when he was younger, and Manslaughter had a family killed by Calypso, so he's out for revenge. Manslaughter also speaks like a normal human, unlike his caveman-esque speech in the final game. Next, there's some webisodes created to promote the game that show what the characters did before they entered the contest and were admitted into the asylum. Or something like that. They're just short videos, so there's not much explanation. Finally, there's some differences between the NTSC and PAL versions of the game. Most have to do with toning down some violence and removing the flying airplane from the scrapyard level. These were done because of Europe's stricter laws on violence in video games, and due to the attack on the World Trade Center on 9/11, which happened 3 months after the game released in North America. These changes were also done to all versions of Twisted Metal Black Online. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the issues. I wish more story was given to Manslaughter and Warthog. I think the only thing Manslaughter needed was a middle cutscene that's rather ominous about who he is. I think it would have enriched his character, and added even more confusion to his name. His loading screens do give a bit of insight, but they're not very revealing. Warthog, driven by Cage, is just someone that yearns to kill and wants Calypso to remove the part in his brain that feels remorse for taking one's life. He's not developed at all, and his motivation is bland and generic. I mentioned how the lack of bosses in this game isn't so bad thanks to the difficulty, but that doesn't mean the difficulty isn't an issue. Having 2 lives is, most of the time, enough for 1 level, but it seems health depletes at such a fast rate, even with the heavy vehicles. The combat just feels a little unfair to the player. Other than that, I don't really have any issues with this game. Twisted Metal Black brought back the dark and gritty nature of the first 2 games, and it worked really well, as the gameplay is engaging and fun, and the cutscenes are rewarding and disturbing. This game is full of content. There's unlockable levels, unlockable characters, and not to mention, who wouldn't want to get all the endings? Let's count out everything Twisted Metal Black has to offer. 10 characters that are unlocked from the start that are buried in their stats, 20 playable levels begging to be explored, and fun regardless of how many enemies remain. A new endurance mode great for becoming better at the game and testing the player's skill. Classic competitive and classic multiplayer modes with a new unique mode that has a lot of replayability. Plenty of cutscenes that get real, mature, and dark, and give personality to the characters. 5 unlockable characters and 10 unlockable levels, with some having specific instructions on how to unlock them. A soundtrack that focused more on chilling players than pumping them up. Good voice acting provided to the characters' monologues in the cutscenes, and plenty of other goodies from previous Twisted Metals. What was once a game that was mostly serious but had its more comedic moments was bastardized by 99 Studios, only for Twisted Metal to come back 2 years later to show the world it can get real dark and edgy if it wants to. While Twisted Metal 1 and 2 had some difficulty issues, and 3 and 4 had bland uninteresting characters, Black comes out supreme with its near-perfect combat and developed characters. And until next time, just remember, none of this is real.
Now that I'm free, I'm going to be the greatest of all time.